How you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Mem Aleph, Daf 41 of Masechet Ksubis, friends. Daf 41, friends. What can I tell you about Daf 41? Woo! Anybody ever heard of Bava Kama? I'm telling you, if I didn't tell you where this Daf was, and I just said, guess what Masechet it's in, you'd say, oh, sounds like Bava Kama. That's what you'd tell me. Friends, we're wrapping up the third parak of Masechet Ksubis, and we talk about Moda B'Knas Potter, fellow who admits to a fine, doesn't have to pay the fine. Chatzi Palga Nizka Mamona Palga Nizka Knosa. Is Chatzi Nezek? What even is Chatzi Nezek? What's Nezek Shalim? What's a short tam, a short muad? Friends, Daf Mem Aleph, Masechet Ksubis. Friends, start all the way at the top. It says the Mishnah Omer Pitisi es bito shel ploni. Oh, one other thing. I don't think I said this. I have my sunglasses next to me over here. And, also my chair is really squeaky. You hear that? You hear that? I hope it doesn't interfere with the audio. Anyways, I have my sunglasses over here because the sun is reflecting on the floor, on the stone floor. It bounces right up to my eyes. So I'm going to pull like a Casey Neistat maybe. And I'll record with my sunglasses on. Ooh, this is talking nice. I should do this like every day. And it actually does help, I think, with the sun. So, friends, Casey Neistat. Alright, let's see if it helps. How Omer Pitisi es bito shel ploni. So if you have a fellow, and he says that he seduced somebody's daughter, okay? Mishalim boshes upagam al pi atzmo. So he has to pay boshes upagam ve'ein mishalim knas, but he doesn't have to pay the 50 shekels because there's a concept of moda b'knas potter. If a fellow admits to something for which he's liable to pay a fine, because as we've learned the other day, when did we learn? We learned recently, I think, right, that a knas is a chiddush, right? That was the opinion of Rabbah, right? He pointed out that a knas is a chiddush. It's not, for example, if I steal something, and then I have to pay kefel. I have to pay twice the amount that I stole. That's not logical. If I steal $20, I should return $20. I have to give back what I stole. But we say, no, you have to give back $40. So that's not logical per se. I don't know why $40, maybe $50, maybe $30. I mean, so it's not necessarily something that I would understand logically, on my own necessarily. But it's a fine. So, in the event that he admits to having done this, and he doesn't wait for it to get to Bezdin, and there's witnesses who come and testify that this happened, and now it's been proven that he did it, and now he has to pay. But if he admits on his own that, let's say, he stole the thing, so then he's going to have to pay back the principal, certainly, but the fine that's sort of added on, he would be exempt from that. So, now when it comes to ones umefate, there's the 50 shekel fine, there's the knas, but then there's things like boshes and pagam that are mammon. They're not a fine, right? You're paying her for her embarrassment, for her sort of her value being detracted. So Omer Pitisi as bito shel plonis, if you have a fellow who admits, he says, look, I slept with somebody's fellow, right? It was a case of mifate. Mishalim boshes ufgam al pi atzmo. So boshes and pagam are mammon. So having admitted that he did it, he's still going to have to pay mammon. Ve'en mishalim knas, but he doesn't pay the 50 shekels because the 50 shekels is a fine, and because he admitted it, so he doesn't pay the fine. Homer ganavti, a fellow says, look, I stole an item. Mishalim is sakaren, so he's got to pay back the principal of what he stole. Al pi atzmo, based on his own admittance. Ve'en mishalim tashlumei kefel, but he won't have to pay the double payment, if it was an animal that he slaughtered, if it was an ox or if it was a sheep or a goat, he doesn't have to pay back 4 or 5 times because he admitted it on his own. He's potter. Hey, Miss Shori es ploni. If a fellow says, look, my ox killed another fellow. Now, what happens is if your ox kills another fellow, we're going to see at the end of the page, it's a shaila if it's a tam or a muad. Who can tell me what a short tam is and a short muad? A short tam, well, let's say this. A short muad is an ox that has gored 3 times and has been warned, right, 3 times that it can't gore. So, right, or, it's gored 3 times. Then the 4th time, by then it's called a shor muad, a warned ox, an ox that's been warned, as opposed to a short tam, which is up until that point, is an ox that is, I don't know, unwarned. I think people are making noise outside. It's been unwarned. And as we're going to see later on, that there's nafkaminas in terms of nezek or chatzi nezek, right? Do you have to pay back full damages or 50% damages? We're going to have to explain what that means. And so a shor muad, a shor that's already been warned 3 times, so then their owner is responsible for full damages. A ox that has not been warned 3 times, the owner is responsible for half damages. So now, if a fellow says that that his ox killed a fellow, so he has to pay for the value of the fellow who's been killed. I mean, we kill the ox. We do not kill the owner. Instead, the owner pays money for the person who was killed. Fine. And I mentioned short time, short muad, because it's possible that there might be there's definitely a difference between, if it's a short time, you have to pay the entire value of the person that was killed. I think it's machlokas if it's a person that it's killed, or the person, or his own, the owner of the ox's value, because he's basically chayiv misa, right? It says v'gam es ba'alav yumos. The pasuk says you kill the ox and you kill the owner too, but he gets out of it by paying his way out of it. So the question is, what's he paying? Is he paying sort of the value of the person who was killed, or his own value that this is in place of himself being killed? But anyways, if it's a shor muad, a warned ox, then he has to pay the full value. If it's a short tam, it's machlokas, either he pays nothing at all, or he pays 50%. So now, if a fellow says, hey, mishori es ploni, so my ox killed a fellow, o shoro shel ploni, or my ox killed another person's ox, so he has to pay, because that's mammon. There's no fine there. He's paying mammon. So therefore he has to pay, even though he admitted it. Hey, mishori avdo shel ploni, if a fellow says that his ox killed somebody's slave, so then there's a fine of 30 shekels. Ein mishalim al piatzmo, so he doesn't pay based on his own admittance, since it's a fine, and moed b'knas is potter. This is the rule. Anybody who's paying more than he damaged, doesn't pay on his own admittance. So for example, if you steal something and you have to pay kefel, twice the amount, so you don't have to write if you admit it, then you don't have to pay that double amount. Of course, you're going to have to pay the principal, however. Now says the Gemara, Velesne anasti. How come, friends? I learned this daf at a chasana. I went to a chasana the other day. So on the bus on the way there, I learned the first Talmud. And then during the chasana, there was at this chasana there was like, I don't exactly know what happened. I left the chasana. Okay, I got there at like 6, I think. I left at 9, so I was there for like 3 hours, and 9 o'clock is late. It depends. Whatever. It's whatever, late-ish, I guess. They mamish just finished the chuppah. I don't know exactly what was going on. Also, part of why I don't know what was going on is because I was preparing Babylon Talmud. So, yeah, I spent a lot of time at that chasna when I was there preparing Babylon Talmud, but Hakoponim, what do you want me to tell you? I don't want you to, I know you guys are going to, if I miss a day, you guys are going to get upset. I'm stuck. Don't worry, I don't mind. I don't mind. Nothing like getting to a chasna and trying to find people to learn with you. Yeah, I saw some other guy the other day. I said, "You're going to the chasana? Good, I'll have a chavrusa." And then I got there and I found him. I said, "I meant it." So we're learning this stuff. The lesson is, if you see me at a chasana, which doesn't happen very often, go the other way. Let's go weiter. So velesni anasti velo miboya velesni anasti. Oh. So why does the Gemara say? What is the Mishnah? Why does the Mishnah say Homer pitisi as bito shaploni? By the way, I've chazered this daf, so don't worry. This isn't. It's not that I've only learned this daf once on the bus to Chasana. I also reviewed it. Don't worry. So Homer pitisi as bito shaploni. Right? So we said if a fellow says that I seduced somebody's daughter, how come davka seducing? What if he says that he was me'anes his daughter, that he raped his daughter? Velesne anasti. So talk about ones. Why talk about mafata davka? Lo miboya ka'amar. So it's saying no, not only this, but even this. Meaning not only ones, but even mefata. What does that mean? Lo miboya anasti delo kapogim lo demishalim boshes ufagam al pi atzmo aval pitisi de kapogim lo emelo mishalim al pi atzmo komash malon. Friends, the yentis in the bungalow colony on Shabbos afternoon. What does this mean? So if we're thinking about like the reputation of this girl, right? This girl was just involved either, against her will or consensually. So now the yentis in the bungalow colony on Shabbos afternoon, when they're talking, so there's a big difference to them if it was ones, which means it was against her will, and she's not to blame. After all, it was against her will. But then there's mefate. You don't want the yentis hearing that, if you're a girl, you don't want the yentis in the bungalow colony on Shabbos afternoon knowing that you had a consensual relationship, an unmarried girl had a consensual relationship with somebody else, because then it looks bad. It looks bad for you. The yentis don't like it. So, therefore, with the Gemara, can I take off my sunglasses? I think I can. Okay, I think that's better. So therefore, the yentis in the bungalow colony on Shabbos afternoon. So says the Gemara, lo mibaya kamar, lo mibaya anasti. So certainly in a case of ones, of rape, the loka pogim law, that by this fellow saying that he raped this girl, so it doesn't cause any sort of harm to her reputation among the yentis in the bungalow colony on Shabbos afternoon, because after all it was against her will. So we can believe him, the mishalim boshes ufgam, and we'll say, okay, well you admitted it, we're going to believe you, and you have to now pay boshes and pagam, al piatzmo, based on his own admittance, aval pitisi. But to say that it was seduction, to say that it was consensual, and he's going to say that he had a consensual relationship with Yenti, so then the Yentis are going to say, wait, I probably shouldn't use Yenti and Yentis, it might get confusing. Sarah. If he says that he had a consensual relationship with Sarah, where it's going to absolutely destroy her reputation among the Yentis in the bungalow colony on Shabbos afternoon, so the kapogim law, that he's ruining her reputation, emalo mishalim al piatzmo. So I might say, we're not just going to allow this guy to show up and ruin this girl's reputation among the yentis in the bungalow colony on Shabbos afternoon. So I might say that we shouldn't believe him, and therefore he doesn't pay the boshes and pagam. Kamash malom, we say no. Even so, we're even not concerned about that, and we say if this guy shows up and says that he was mefate, sorry, it was consensual, well, he nonetheless has to pay boshes and pagam to her father. Fine. And our Mishnah is not like the following Tana. The Tana is, we learn in the Brisa, Reb Shimon ben Yehuda Omer, says Reb Shimon ben Yehuda, Mishum Reb Shimon, Av boshes upagam eino mishalim, that he does not pay boshes and pagam. Even though it's mammon, he still doesn't pay it al piatzmo based on his own admittance. Lav kol emenu shiv gombito shaploni, because we can't just believe him to ruin so-and-so's daughter, to ruin her reputation among the yentis in the bungalow colony on Shabbos afternoon. Omer Rav Papa Abaye, says Rav Papa to Abaye, nichola l'dido mai, but what if she doesn't care? What if she says, look, I really don't care about the yentis in the bungalow colony on Shabbos afternoon. Kol hakavod to her. Kol hakavod to her. She said, I really couldn't care less what the yentis in the bungalow colony on Shabbos afternoon think about me. So then what? So in that case, would Reb Shimon ben Yehuda say that we would believe him in that case? And he would have to pay boshes upgam? But yeah, maybe if she doesn't care, maybe her father cares about what the yentis in the bungalow colony on Shabbos afternoon think. But what if her father also doesn't care what the yentis in the bungalow colony on Shabbos afternoon think? But maybe the people in the family won't be comfortable about it, and they're concerned about what the yentis in the bungalow colony on Shabbos afternoon think. But what if they also don't care? Look, somebody in the family must be concerned about what the yentis in the bungalow colony on Shabbos afternoon think, and therefore, it's basically a little plug. Reb Shimon ben Yehuda says that we don't believe this guy to say that he was mifate this girl, and he doesn't therefore pay Bosh Sufkam. So the Mishnah had said that if a fellow says that he stole something, so he's got to pay the principal. He's got to pay the principal amount. However, he doesn't pay, kefel, arba v'chamisha, that he does not pay. Because he admitted it, and it's mod b'knas potter. Itmar, friends, you ready? You ready for Bava Kama? You ready for Bava Kama? When are we getting to Bava Kama? So we have to learn Ksubis, and then we have Nazir, Nidarim, Sota, Gittin, Kiddushin, Bava Kama. So a little teaser. Itmar Palga Nizka. When it comes to Chatzi Nezek, so I had mentioned earlier, right? So for example, let's say you have an ox, and an ox gores and kills another ox. Okay? So it depends. If the killing ox was warned, it had a history, it was warned 3 times already, and then it killed a 4th time, so then the owner of that ox is responsible for all of the damages. All of the damages. Now, if, however, the ox had not gored 3 times, so it was not a shor muad, it was a shor tam, so then the owner is responsible for half of the damages. And that's what's called Chatzi Nezek, half damages. So, Itmar was stated, Palga Nizka, when it comes to Chatzi Nezek, Rav Papa Omar Palga Nizka Mamona. Rav Huna B'Redi of Yeshua Omar Palga Nizka Knoso. So here we see machlokas between Rav Papa and Rav Huna B'Redi of Yeshua about how do we treat Chatzi Nezek. Do we say Palga Nizka Knoso? Do we say that or do we say Mamona? Right? Do we say like Rav Papa that Palga Nizka is Mamona, that Chatzi Nezek is Mamon? Or do we say like Rav Huna B'Redi of Yeshua that Chatzi Nezek we treat it as a knas? What's the nafkamina? The nafkamina is what we're talking about, moda b'knas potter. If, a guy says, look, I admit that my shor tam killed another ox, so he's chayv to pay chatzi nezek. So it depends. If chatzi nezek is a fine, so then moda b'knas potter shouldn't have to pay anything. He admitted it. If we say that chatzi nezek is mammon, well, you have to pay mammon. So Rav Papa says that Chatzi Nezek is Mammon. Rav Huna B'Redi of Yeshua says Chatzi Nezek is Knas. Rav Papa Omer Palga Nizka Mamona. Rav Papa says that the reason why we treat Chatzi Nezek as Mammon, Kosover Stam Shvarim Lav B'Chezka Shimur Kaime, because Rav Papa says, look, an ox does not have a default status of being guarded, of being sort of safe. An ox at any time could do something dangerous, and therefore the owner needs to guard it and make sure that nothing, unfortunate is going to happen. And the fact that the owner, was off his guard or whatever, let down his guard, and his ox killed another ox, uvidinu de mishalim kule. So really, the owner should have to pay the other owner, right? So if Ruvain's ox killed Shimon's ox, so look, Ruvain's ox by default is not considered, friendly. It's considered dangerous by default. Ruvain should have been paying better attention. And for the fact that he dropped the ball, he fell asleep at the wheel, so it's his fault. And really, therefore, Ruvain should have to pay back Shimon entirely. But the Torah says, look, it was the first time it happened, I guess the second time or third time even, but it was the first time it happened, whatever, it was a short time. So we say, look, we'll take it easy on the guy. Torah, because at this point, it was still a shor tam, it was not a shor mu'ad. So therefore, according to Rav Papa, he says, look, by default, an ox is dangerous, and Reuven has to be careful. He wasn't careful, therefore he's responsible to pay Shimon back for his dead ox. And you should have to pay complete damages, but the Torah says because it was a short time, we take it easy on the guy, and he pays half damages. So that's why we consider Chatzi Nezek to be Mammon. Rav Huna Beit of Yeshua Amar, whereas Rav Huna Beit of Yeshua argues and says, Palgan is Knosa, that we treat Chatzi Nezek as a fine. What does that mean? He says Punkt Fakert. He says the opposite. Because Rav Huna Beit of Yeshua says, look, by default, an ox is considered harmless. It's considered guarded on its own. You don't really have to pay too much attention. The ox isn't going to do much. And therefore, the fact that Reuven's ox killed Shimon's ox, it was a complete fluke. Complete fluke. And for, it was a complete fluke. Reuven is not responsible for paying back Shimon. I mean, he didn't do anything wrong. He's not responsible for paying back Shimon. But the Torah says, you know what, Reuven, even though, technically speaking, you didn't do anything wrong, you probably could have done more to prevent this situation. And therefore, to sort of set a sort of standard that owners should know that if their ox ends up causing any damage, they're going to be responsible to pay for half of it. Even though, by default, the ox is considered harmless and fine and stuff. And technically speaking, if it does damage, then it was a complete fluke. And Reuven should be off the hook. But we say, Reuven, just to make sure that you're going to sort of keep an extra eye on it, just in case, if anything happens, you're going to be responsible for half damages. It's like this, Reuven will just kind of keep an extra eye. So from that respect, it's a fine, right? Meaning, Me'ikar Adin, Reuven shouldn't have to pay anything, because the ox is peaceful by default. The fact that he has to pay half damages is above and beyond sort of what he should have to pay, which is nothing. So in that respect, half damages is considered a fine. It's considered a knas. So that is the machlokus between Rav Papa and Rav Huna Beit of Yeshua about, do we treat Chatzi Nezek as a fine or as mammon? I don't know what I just said. I may have just said a knas and a fine, which obviously are the same thing. So Rav Papa says that it is mammon, money, and Rav Huna Beit of Yeshua says that it is a knas, a fine. So now we're basically going to be spending, I'd say, like the rest of the daf, which essentially is the rest of the perek, going back, trying to bring proofs, or mostly really questions against Rav Huna Beit of Yeshua, right, to try to make the argument that Chatzi Nezek is mammon, right? And we're going to be questioning the opinion of Rav Huna Beit of Yeshua, who says that Chatzi Nezek is a knas. Okay, we said, Siman Hezek ma vehemis klal viter. Tanan, so we have a Mishnah. The Mishnah says, Hanizak ve'amazik b'tashlumin. We have a Mishnah in Bava Kameh that says that both the nizak and the mazik, so in our example, Shimon, who sustained damages, and the mazik, Reuven, who damaged, his ox damaged, b'tashlumin, they both have to contribute to the payment. Let's go weiter for a second. Bishlam Lamanda Amar Palganiska Mamona Hanu de Shaykh Nizak Betashlumin. Elamanda Amar Palganiska Knosa Hashad Labdide Kashakil Betashlumin Ise. Friends, what does that mean? It means like this. We have a Mishnah in Bava Kameh that says that both Reuven and Shimon are responsible for contributing to the Chatzi Nezek. So we're saying that, look, I understand this if we say the Chatzi Nezek is mammon. If we say that really Reuven should have been paying attention because his ox is by default dangerous, Reuven should have been paying attention. He wasn't paying attention enough, and his ox ended up killing Shimon's ox. Reuven should have to pay back Shimon for his ox in its entirety. But because it was a short time, the Torah says, look, Reuven, even though really you should be paying 100%, it was a short time, you could pay 50%. So in that respect, Shimon's losing out 50%. So he's forfeiting, he's absorbing 50% of the damages, because he's owed 100%, but he's only getting 50%. He's sort of, contributing 50% of the payment. So in that respect, Reuven is contributing 50%, and Shimon's contributing 50%. But if you say that Chatzi Nezek is a knas, well, if that's the case, then Shimon is owed 0. He's owed nothing. There is nothing that is, belongs to him right now. Reuven's ox killed Shimon's ox. Reuven's ox by default is considered to be peaceful. It was a complete fluke that it killed Shimon's ox. Really, Reuven should have to pay nothing. The Torah finds him and says, you know what? Even though technically you have to pay nothing, give Shimon 50%. So in that respect, Shimon's not contributing anything. He should just be happy that he's getting 50%. That's more than he deserves, Me'ikar Adin. So in that respect, then how do you understand that both Reuven and Shimon are contributing to the Chatzi Nezek? If you say that Chatzi Nezek is a knas, it's only Reuven who's paying the fine. It's only Reuven who's contributing 50%. Shimon should just be happy that he's getting that much. So that's the shaila against Rav Huna Bar Yeshua. So let's read that again. Tanan, we learn in the Mishnah, Nizak v'amazik b'tashlumin, that both Reuven and Shimon have to contribute to the payment of Chatzi Nezek. B'shlam l'man da'omer palga nizka mamona. So I understand, according to a papa who says that Chatzi Nezek is mammon, and that really Shimon deserves to receive 100%, but he's forfeiting, he's sort of absorbing 50% of the damages. Hanu d'shayich nizak b'tashlumin. So I understand why, I understand how we could be saying that Shimon is contributing to 50% of the damages, that is absorbing the loss. But according to Rav Huna Bar Yeshua, says a Chatzi Nezek is a fine. Then Shimon, when he accepts the 50%, he's not accepting 50% that really rightfully belongs to him. Really, he doesn't deserve anything, since it's a fine. B'tashlumin isei, and now we're going to try to make the argument that he's actually absorbing 50% of the cost. He's not absorbing anything. He's gaining over here. He's gaining 50% damages when he should be gaining 0% damages. So nitzurcha ela lefachas nevela. Oh. Who can tell me what this means? So to understand this, you have to understand how Chatzi Nezek is calculated. Who can tell me how Chatzi Nezek is calculated? So let's say Shimon's ox was worth 200 shekels. Okay? So Reuven's ox kills Shimon's ox. Shimon's ox was worth 200 shekels. So we say that Reuven has to pay Chatzi Nezek. He has to pay 50% damages. Friends, who could tell me how much 50% damages is for an ox that was worth 200 shekels? It's a trick question, friends. It's a trick question. Who could tell me how much 50% damages on an ox that's 200 shekels is? The wrong answer is 100 shekels. That's the wrong answer. You know why it's the wrong answer? It's the wrong answer because Shimon's ox was worth 200 shekels. When Reuven's ox kills Shimon's ox doesn't just disappear. It's there. It's dead. It's not alive, but it's dead. And the carcass has value. He could sell it to a treif butcher shop. He could make the hide into shoes. So Shimon isn't left with nothing. His ox is dead. It's not going to be worth 200 shekels anymore, that's for sure. But maybe it's worth 100 shekels. Maybe he could sell the dead ox to the treifa butcher shop for 100 shekels. So it's not like he's left with nothing. So how much then did Shimon really lose out? If the carcass of Shimon's animal that was 200 shekels, the carcass is worth 100 shekels, how much is he losing by Reuven killing his ox? He's really losing 100 shekels. So when we say that there's Chatzi Nezek, that Reuven has to pay 50% of the damages, doesn't mean 50% of the value of Shimon's ox when he was alive. It means 50% of the damages incurred. The damages incurred was not 200 shekels, it was 100 shekels, because he still has a carcass that's valued at 100 shekels. So on the 100 shekels that he lost, Reuven has to pay him back 50% of that. So that's what we're talking about. First of all, just in terms of how Chatzi Nezek works. So now, when we say, so now how does this tie in? How does this tie in that even according to, how can Rav Huna Bar Yeshua explain that Rav Huna Bar Yeshua says that Chatzi Nezek is a knas, is a fine, and that really Reuven shouldn't have to pay Shimon any of that 100 shekels. But we say nonetheless, Reuven pays 50 shekels, so that'll be more careful. So how is Shimon contributing to this? You know how Shimon's contributing to this? Because we just said that the carcass is worth 100 shekels. And therefore, Shimon can't claim those 100 shekels from Reuven because he still has that value. He didn't lose that value. He could sell it to the butcher shop. But in order for us to make Reuven pay for the remaining 100 shekels, we have to take the carcass to Bezdin and have Bezdin take a look at it and evaluate it and say that, okay, it's truly worth 100 shekels. Evaluate how much it's worth. But guess what? By the time they can make it to Bezdin and whatever it is, comes the time to evaluate the carcass, it's already gone down in value. The meat is starting to deteriorate, whatever it is. By the time Bezdin says how much the carcass is worth, by now it's worth 50 shekels, let's say. Who swallows that difference? So while at the time that the ox died, the carcass was 100 shekels, and therefore the damage is the difference between the current value of 100 shekels and the value when it was alive of 200 shekels. That's 100 shekels, 50% of that is 50. Now, by the time they evaluate it, the carcass is only worth 50 shekels. Which means that now the difference between when the ox was alive and worth 200 shekels to what it's worth now, by the time it gets to Bezdin, 50 shekels was a difference of 150. So I would think that Shimon should really be able to get 75 shekels, half of 150. But that's not true. We evaluate the carcass of the animal based on the time that it died. And at the time that it died, the carcass was worth 100. And by the time it got to Bezdin, it's now worth 50. Shimon swallows that depletion or whatever, that lowering, devaluation, degradation, of the depreciation, maybe, of the carcass from that time. And that's how Shimon contributes. So therefore, we could say that Chatzi Nezek is a fine, is a knas, and really Shimon doesn't get anything. But Reuven, the Torah says, Reuven will be extra careful, pay him half of the difference between the carcass and when it was alive. And what Shimon contributes is the amount that the carcass depreciates between the time that it died and the time that it goes to Bezdin to be evaluated. That depreciation is not taken into account when figuring out how much Reuven has to pay. And if the carcass went from being 100 shekels to being 50 shekels now, Reuven still pays the difference between 100 shekels and 200 shekels, not between 50 shekels and 200 shekels. So Shimon is going to get 50 shekels, not 75, and he has to swallow the difference, and that is how Shimon contributes to the Chatzi Nezek. Woo! Above a comment. So El Lepachas Nevela. So we say that that's how Shimon contributes. So even if you want to say Chatzi Nezek is a knas, that's how Shimon contributes, by sort of absorbing the depreciation of the carcass. Pachas Nevela Tanina. We say that the depreciation of the carcass, we already have a different Mishnah that teaches us that Tashlume Nezek, that when we say Tashlume Nezek, that it could have said like Mishalim Mesa Nezek, right? It could have said that he pays the Nezek, but it says instead Tashlume Nezek. Alright? How come it says it that Lashon? Mlamet Shabailin Mitaplin Binevela. It teaches that, so from what we learn out from there is that the Shimon basically is responsible for the carcass and any depreciation he's responsible for. So why would I need two different places to teach us this? So chada b'tam v'chada b'mur. So we say, well, because one is by a tam and one is by a mur, right? One is to say that both by a shor tam when we're evaluating chatzi nezek, and both by a shor mur when we're evaluating the nezek shalem, the depreciation of the carcass from the time that the animal dies to the time that they get to Bezdin, the depreciation is still lost to Shimon. Reuven doesn't pay for him for that, right? So if it's nezek shalim, so if Shimon's ox was worth 200, then Reuven's ox killed Shimon's ox. Now the carcass is worth 100. Reuven's got to pay him the difference between 100 and 200, which is 100. And even though by the time it got to Bezdin, the carcass depreciated to 50, Shimon absorbs that. So that's by both a shor tam and by a shor mur. And we needed to teach that separately. The ashmo'inon tam, because if we would only learn that Shimon absorbs it by a shor tam, mishum da akati lo iyad. Because you could say, look, we're not going to make Reuven responsible for this. Look, it was a shor tam. We're not going to hold Reuven responsible. Shimon will absorb this cost of a mur to iyad. But by shor mur, where what the heck was going on with Reuven? Why wasn't he guarding his shor muad? Not only does he have to pay nezek shalom, I would think that he should also have to pay for the depreciation of the carcass. Ema lo. So therefore, I needed to say that no, even by shor muad, also Shimon is responsible for the depreciation of the carcass. V'ashminun muad, and if we say that by shor muad, Shimon is responsible for the depreciation of the carcass, mishum mishalim kule, because I can make the argument, look, Reuven's paying him the entire value of the damages that he incurred. Let Shimon absorb the cost of the depreciation of the carcass. Aval tam, but if it's a short tam where he's only getting 50%, Ema lo, I'll say maybe Reuven is responsible. Therefore, we need to teach both by a short tam and by a short muad that Shimon is responsible for the depreciation of his ox's carcass. Okay, so we tried to say that paganiska mamona and not knasa, but Rav Huna ben Yeshua is able to save his opinion. Tashma coming here. Ma bein tam limud. So we have a brayso that says, what's the difference? And what we're basically assuming is, what's the single difference between a short tam and a short muad? Sha'atam mishalim chatzi nezek migufo, umuad mishalim nezek shalom min aliyah. That by a short tam, he only pays from the body of it. The heck does that mean? It means that if Reuven's ox, the one that gored Shimon's ox, is worth 75 shekels. No, it's worth 25 shekels. I'm going to put back on sunglasses. If Reuven's ox was worth 25 shekels, and it kills Shimon's ox, right? Shimon's ox was 200 shekels. We said that the carcass was worth 100 shekels. So then Reuven now has to pay half of the difference, which is 100 shekels. Half of that is 50 shekels. So Reuven has to pay Shimon 50 shekels, but his entire ox is only worth 25 shekels. So he only pays 25 shekels to Shimon, right? So he says, right, that by a short tam, that by a short tam, you only pay chatzi nezek up to the value of the goring ox. And if the goring ox is worth less than the chatzi nezek of the dead ox, so then you only pay up to the value of the goring ox, and Shimon swallows the remainder. Umuad mishalim nezek shalom min aliyah, whereas by a shor muad, Reuven would have to pay no matter how much the value of Shimon's ox was, he's got to pay in full. V'lo katoni shatam enu mishalim al pi atzmo, muad mishalim al pi atzmo. And conspicuously, the brayso did not say that another difference between a short tam and a short muad is that by a short tam, if he admits that his ox killed Shimon's ox, he would be potter from paying chatzi nezek. Now, if chatzi nezek was a knas, well then, if Reuven admitted it, he would be potter from paying the chatzi nezek, because moed b'knas is potter. But it doesn't say that. It says the only difference between a short tam and a short muad is the migufo versus me'aliyah. But if Rav Huna ben Yeshua is right that chatzi nezek is a knas, so then there's another difference. That by a short tam, if he admits it, if Reuven admitted that his short tam killed Shimon's shor, then he should be potter from paying chatzi nezek, because it's a knas. So the Gemara says Tana v'Shayir. The Gemara says Eina Chinami. It could have also listed that, but there were other things. It didn't list everything. It listed that the difference is Mishal Migufo versus Mishal Min Aliyah, and it left out the fact that if Reuven would admit it, he would be potter from paying because it's a knas. My shire, die shire. So the Gemara says, oh yeah? Okay, so if it left things out, what else did it leave out? Shire chatzi kofer. So we say, you know what it left out? Chatzi kofer. That if, as I mentioned earlier on the daf, that if a short tam kills somebody, if a short tam kills a person, so then he'll pay chatzi kofer. He'll pay half of the value of the person, let's say. So whereas if a short muad kills a person, so he pays the value of the person. But if a short tam kills a person, he pays half of it. To which we say that's not actually a thing, because there actually isn't a concept of chatzi kofer. To which we say, no, this brisa is authored by Rabbi Yossi Aglili, who says that a short tam does pay chatzi kofer, does pay half kofer, which means that there is a difference between a shor muad and a shor tam, and that a shor muad pays full kofer, if it, right, the value of the person who died, let's say, and shor tam only pays 50% kofer, and therefore, so the Brisa says that the difference between a shor tam and a shor muad is that a shor tam pays me gufo, and a shor muad pays me aliyah. We say, yeah, but what about the fact that also a shor tam, if he admits it, he'd be potter because moed b'knas is potter. We say, ena chinami, that's also a difference. There are other differences also. There's also kofer, chatzi kofer. The Brisa was not giving a comprehensive list. It mentioned one thing, but there are others, including that, yes, if you would admit that his shor tam killed Shimon's shor, so he would be potter from paying chatzi nezek because it's a knas. Fine. So again, Rav Huna bar Yeshua manages to save himself. Toshma komenir. Hemis shori es ploni. If a fellow says, this is from our Mishnah. Hemis shori es ploni. Right? Ruvain says that his ox killed a person. O shoro shel ploni. Or his ox killed Shimon's ox. Hareze mishalem alpi atzmo. So he has to pay, right? So if Ruvain says that his ox killed Shimon's ox, so he's got to pay Shimon. My lab bitam, and the Gemara suggests that this is talking about a short tam, and nonetheless we're saying that even though he admitted it, he has to pay. So we see that chatzi nezek is mamon, and therefore he has to pay lo b'muad. We'll say no, it's talking about a short muad. If Ruvain admits that his ox killed Shimon's, that his short muad killed Shimon's ox, so then he'd be chayiv to pay because it's nezek shalim. But if it's chatzi nezek, he'd be potter because moed b'knas is potter. But b'tam mai einu mishalim al pi atzmo. So 1 second. So are we really saying then that if it was a shor tam and Ruvain said that his shor tam killed Shimon's shor, he wouldn't have to pay because moed b'knas is potter? Adatoni seifa avdo shel ploni einu mishalim al pi atzmo. Well, when the Mishnah then continues and says, but by the way, if Ruvain says that his ox killed Shimon's slave, so then he would not have to pay Shimon the 30 shekels for his slave since he's moed b'knas potter. So we're already giving differences, right? We're saying that if Ruvain says that his shor muad kills Shimon's shor, so then he's going to be chayev to pay because it's mamon. He's going to be chayiv to pay. But if he says that his ox killed Shimon's eved, so then he's going to be potter because the 30 shekels is a knas and moed b'knas is potter. Well, niflok v'nesnim b'didei. Let's also say, when do we say, right, there are other chilukim over here, right? We say that when he says that his ox kills Shimon's ox, right, his shor muad ox kills Shimon's ox, so he has to pay. But if he kills Shimon's slave, he doesn't have to pay. Well, there's also another situation where he doesn't have to pay. When do we say that he does have to pay for the ox? B'muad. If Ruvain's ox is a shor muad. Aval tam. But if Ruvain's ox was a shor tam, einu mishalim al pi atzmo. He wouldn't have to pay based on his own admittance because it would be chatzi nezek. Chatzi nezek is a knas and moed b'knas potter. Kula b'muad kamayrit. Which the Gemara answers, meh. Says, but the Mishnah is talking about shor muad. It's not talking about a shor tam, and that's why it didn't mention the distinction that if it was a shor tam, then he would be potter because of moed b'knas is potter. The Mishnah is talking about shor muad. It's not talking about shor tam, therefore it didn't go there. Toshma, komenir, ze haklal. So the Mishnah had said this is the general rule. Kol hamishalim yoser amal shehizik, that anybody who pays more than he damaged. Right, so for example, like kefel, let's say, right? So if you have a fellow steals something, and then he has to pay back double, but he admits that he stole it, so then he doesn't have to pay double. So right, kol mishalim yoser al mashahizik, any payment that would be above the principal, eino mishalim al pi atzmo, if he admits it, then he's potter. What's the implication, friends? Implying that, but if he has to pay less than what he damaged, i.e., if he has to pay chatzi nezek, mishalim al pi atzmo. We said if he has to pay more, something like kefel, then Einu mishalim al piatzmo, moda b'knas is potter. Implying though that if he has to pay less, something like a chatzi nezek, mishalim al piatzmo. Implying that even though he's admitting it, he has to pay. So it's chatzi nezek mammon. Lo tema hapachos mimashehezek. No, don't. That's not the sort of inference you should make. Do not say that. Oh, but if it's chatzi nezek, then he would have to pay. Ela ema hakama shehezek mishalim al piatzmo. No, rather say, meaning if it's more than the amount, he's potter, but if it's the exact amount, i.e. if it's just the principal, if it's mammon, so then he would pay al piatzmo. Aval pachos mai, period, let's say, right? So, but if it was less than that, i.e. if it was chatzi nezek, also, he would not pay, right? So if it's above, he would not pay because moda b'knas is potter, and if it was chatzi nezek, he also would not pay because moda b'knas potter, but if it's the exact amount, so then he would pay because then it's mammon. So one second, about pachos mai einu mishalim al piatzmo. One second. So we're saying that if it was less than the principal, i.e. if it's chatzi nezek, then einu mishalim al piatzmo because it's a knas. Lesne, well then the Mishnah should say, ze haklal, this is the rule, kol she'einu mishalim kama shehezik, einu mishalim al piatzmo. Well then the Mishnah should, instead of saying that anybody who pays more than they damaged is potter, implying that if it's the same or less, you would be chayiv, implying that chatzi nezek is mammon. Why not just say anybody who pays the same amount that he damaged, chayiv to pay, implying the mashma pachos mashma yoser. Wait, what did I say? Slightly different. Kol she'einu mishalim kama shehizik. Anybody who's not going to be paying the amount that he stole, einu mishalim al piatzmo, does not pay on his own admittance. Dimashma pachos mashma yoser, which would imply, therefore, right? Anybody who is not paying what they stole is going to be, right, potter when he admits it. So that implies whether he's got to pay more, something like kefel or arba v'chamisha, or whether it's less, like a chatzi nezek. In any of those cases, he would be potter. Tiyufta. The Gemara says, "Taka good kasha." Taka good kasha. If we're saying that chatzi nezek is potter, then yeah, it's a good question. The Mishnah should have said that anybody who's not paying the principal amount, whether it's more, whether it's less, is potter. But it doesn't say it. It says dafka somebody who's paying more is potter, implying that somebody who pays less would be chayiv, implying that chatzi nezek is mammon. The Gemara says that's taka a good question. Vilchsa palgan is kaknasa. Nonetheless, the Gemara says, what's the halacha? Chatzi nezek is a knas. Tiyufta v'ilchasa? The Gemara says, what? We literally just ask an unanswerable question against the opinion of chatzi nezek being a knas, saying that from our Mishnah it doesn't make sense because it davka says that you're paying more than the principal, you're potter from based on your own admittance. But if you're paying chatzi nezek, you'd be chayav. So chatzi nezek is mammon, and then we're saying the halacha is chatzi nezek is a knas. The Gemara says that's exactly what we're saying because time of my itosif. What was your big question? What was your big challenge to saying chatzi nezek is a knas? The wording of the Mishnah? That the wording of the Mishnah implied that chatzi nezek, you have to pay al piatzmo? Well, guess what? Mishum delo katoni kama shehezik, because it didn't say that dafka, if you're not paying the amount, that the principal amount, then you're potter. Lo psikale. It couldn't have done that. Because even if the Mishnah would have said that in any situation where you're not paying the principal amount, you're potter, that also wouldn't have been true. There's chatzi nezek by tzroris. If you have an animal that's walking and it kicks up pebbles as it's walking and it causes damage, we say that you have to pay chatzi nezek, and that's halacha Moshe Misinai, that it's mammon. So there we have a situation of chatzi nezek that's mammon, and in that case, even if you admit it, you'd have to pay because it's mammon. So therefore, even if you say that chatzi nezek is a knas, when it comes to a goring, when it comes to tzroris, it would be mammon. That's halacha Moshe Misinai. And therefore, to say that from the fact that the Mishnah says that if you pay more than the amount, you're potter, implying that if you pay less than the amount, you'd be chayiv even if you admit it. And saying that, right, and we want to say that if chatzi nezek was a knas and you'd be potter, then it should have said in any event where you're not paying the principal amount, then you're potter based on your own admittance. But that wouldn't really be true, because what about the chatzi nezek of tzroris, where you're paying less than the amount, and that's halacha Moshe Misinai that it's mammon, and you would pay that. So therefore, it's not really such a strong kasha to say that the wording of the Mishnah implies that Chatzi Nezek is Mammon, because it really couldn't have said it any other way, because to imply that Chatzi Nezek is a Knas, you would then have kashas on Chatzi Nezek of Tzroris. So therefore, it's not really a stark kasha, and we say that actually the halacha is Chatzi Nezek is a Knas. I hope I didn't confuse anything right there at the end, but basically, we couldn't play around with the wording of the Mishnah, and we say in the end, Chatzi Nezek is a Knas. V'hashta de Omar Palga Nizka Knasos. So now that we've said that Chatzi Nezek is a Knas, and not Mammon, Hai Kalba de Ochal Imre. If you have a dog that eats sheep, I think, Vishunra de Ochal Tarnagole, or a cat that eats Tarnagole Ravave, that eats big chickens, Mishunahu, that's something that's unusual. And if it's unusual, you're going to be paying Chatzi Nezek. And if we're saying that Chatzi Nezek is a fine, V'lo Magbinon Bibavel, we can't collect fines in Bavel, because to collect a fine, as we're going to learn in Masechta Sanhedrin, you need mumchin. And we don't do smicha, right? Smicha is basically how you transmit the chain of rabbinics from one generation to the next, stemming back to Moshe Rabbeinu, which the Gemara on Daf Yud Gimel, or Daf Yud Dalet, I think Daf Yud Gimel, in Masechta Sanhedrin describes sort of the last time that happened, and we don't have it anymore. So Mishunahu v'lo magbinu b'bavel, right? So we don't collect fines in Bavel, and if we're saying Chatzi Nezek is a Knas, that means that in these cases that are of Chatzi Nezek, they would be unable to be collected in Bavel. Aval zutre orchehu, but if it was like small chickens, then that's more normal. Magbina, and we could collect them in Bavel, because it wouldn't be Chatzi Nezek. V'i tafas lo mafkinon mine. Now, even in the situation of Chatzi Nezek, where we cannot sort of adjudicate that in Bavel because we don't have mumchim, but if, let's say, Shimon, the victim, just went and chapped what he felt he was owed, we wouldn't force him to give it back. The Omer Akbu li Zimna l'Eretz Yisrael, and if the victim says, you know what, I want to take this case to Eretz Yisrael where there are mumchim, and adjudicate the case there, Makbinon le, so we say, okay, well, a damager and victim, you got to go to Eretz Yisrael like the victim wants. V'lo azil, and if the damager, if the mazik doesn't go, mishamtinan le, you basically excommunicate him. Benkach uvenkach. Now, regardless of if they're going to go to Eretz Yisrael, mishamtinan le, we're gonna, if the mazik doesn't get rid of this dangerous animal, we would, basically force him to and excommunicate him otherwise. The aminan le slik azekcha. He said you got to get rid of your damaging, thing. Based on Reb Nosson, the Tanya Reb Nosson Omer says Reb Nosson, Adam Kelev. How do you know that a fellow should not have an evil dog in his house? Harpua. Did you ever hear of the dog Harpua? I think Harpua was a very nasty dog, I think. Anyways, so we do Reb Nosson, the Tanya, Reb Nosson Omer, Minayin Shel Yigdal Adam Kelev Rab B'soch Beiso. How do you know that a fellow shouldn't have a dog like Harpua in his house? And you shouldn't have a sort of unsturdy ladder. That could also be dangerous. Shneimar, as the Apostle says, you shouldn't have blood in your house. So basically, don't do dangerous things. And therefore, if this guy's got this killer animal, so then he shouldn't have it around, and we're going to force him to get rid of it anyways. Alright, friends, that was the Hadron Olach Elunairis. Alright, well, I'll come back to Elunairis. Now, the truth is, tomorrow, Oichet, we're going to be discussing Chatzi Nezek, Knasa Shtickle as well. But anyways, I got to run because L'maisa Shabbos starts pretty soon, in like 25 minutes, and I have another episode of Babylon Talmud to record. So, I'll see y'all tomorrow. Peace out.